She humbled a billionaire with one touching request. What happened next will change everything. Sarah felt the weight of the world sitting heavy on her shoulders as she wiped down the counter at the diner. The flickering neon sign outside buzzed like the swarm of thoughts in her mind. Her son, Jason, deserved better than this life. A modest house that creaked with age and a yard never touched by a swing set. She took pride in her work, serving regulars their bottomless coffee while trying to ignore how invisible she felt in a town where the wealthy thrived, oblivious to the daily struggles of families like hers. Every plate she cleared, every table she set, they were echoes of her relentless commitment. But how long could she keep it up? As the diner emptied, Sarah's mind raced with doubt. What would it take for someone to really see her? To understand that the dreams of kids like Jason were at stake? The upcoming visit of Thomas, the billionaire, returned to lead discussions on education, mocked her quiet existence. Would he even notice her? She resented the power he held over their lives, a reality that made her stomach churn as she put Jason to bed on worn sheets. In those moments, surrounded by the faded photographs of better times, she fought hard against the creeping despair. The small town split by opportunity felt unforgiving. Yet, she steeled herself. The truth burned bright within her. A mother's love demanded action. So, on a fateful afternoon, when she volunteered at the struggling after-school program, something shifted. Kids, hungry for knowledge and hope, chased dreams despite their circumstances, filling the room with laughter and learning. She watched them, heart swelling and tight, knowing they were trapped in an invisible cage made by others' indifference. When she gathered her courage to approach Thomas, her heart raced, throat dry. "Can you come and spend a day here, please?" she blurted, desperation lacing her voice. "See how they fight to chase their dreams?" Her pulse quickened as he met her gaze, brows furrowing. It felt unreal, asking a billionaire to step down from his pedestal. The tension cracked the air between them. He hesitated, clearly uncertain. What good would that do? Impossible questions swirled in Sarah's mind. What if she was wasting her breath? Yet the fear of remaining silent, of letting the dreams of these kids fade away into oblivion, surged within her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His reluctant agreement ignited a flicker of hope, but the vision was clouded by dread when the morning news brought devastating reports. Cuts from his own foundation threatened to strike the very center that nurtured the aspirations of her community. Panic washed over her like a cold wave. How could this happen? Questions spiraled as she envisioned Jason's future slipping away. The chasm between their lives threatened to crumble the fragile connection they'd begun to forge. What did it mean when the world painted wealth as the ally of progress, while underneath, families like hers struggled for breath? Sarah clenched her fists, knowing that her resolve must be stronger than the fate looming over them. With every interaction with Thomas, emotions churned: anger, despair, determination. As the stakes deepened, would he recognize the urgency that fueled every heartbeat in the room? As she stood at the brink, gears grinding within her heart, one question echoed louder than the rest. What if Thomas could finally see the truth she carried in her daily battles, the burdens often masked by privilege? A storm of frustration thundered in her chest, and she braced herself, determined to be heard. But would anyone listen before it all fell apart? The next morning, Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her reflection a canvas of determination and anxiety. The shadows under her eyes darkened her resolve, yet as she combed her fingers through her hair, she reminded herself that today wasn't just another round of coffee spills and empty plates. This time, she was an architect of possibility, the voice of those who could not speak. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every child dreaming in the dark. As she prepared for Thomas's visit, the air felt thick with tension. Questions raced through her mind, each one more daunting than the last. What if he dismissed the gravity of his consequences? Would he only see their poverty without understanding their potential? Feeling her heart pound, Sarah pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, a list of stories from her own childhood, moments of hope and struggle she wanted to share with Thomas. They were a reminder that it was possible to rise from the ashes. When Thomas arrived, Sarah immediately noted the sharp contrast between their worlds. He stepped from a luxury car, his tailored suit brushing against her denim apron. As he surveyed the diner, his expression was a mixture of curiosity and detachment, as if he operated on a different frequency. She could feel the crowd of expectation swelling around her, and in that moment, every word she had rehearsed fell away. "Welcome to the diner," she managed, her voice unexpectedly steady. The overwhelming scent of grease and coffee filled the air, inviting yet familiar. As he followed her to a booth, she felt the weight of each step, not just for her, but for every heartbeat constricted by circumstance. They exchanged polite small talk, but the real conversation waited beneath the surface, unanswered and growing. When the initial awkwardness began to dissipate, Sarah seized the moment. "Can I tell you about one of our students?" she ventured, her pulse quickening. As she spoke of Malik, a bright boy with dreams of becoming a scientist, she watched for any flicker of recognition in Thomas's blue eyes. "He spends hours in the after-school program," she continued. "Not just because he loves science, but because his family struggles to keep the lights on. He dreams big, despite the world trying to dim his light." Thomas listened, the furrows in his brow deepening, showing a blend of intrigue and discomfort. Perhaps it was the first real glimpse of the fight raging just beneath the surface of these kids' lives. She pushed forward. "This isn't just about test scores or foundation grants. It's about believing that kids like Malik can have a future they deserve. Are we really doing enough? Can we change lives, not just careers?" The silence that followed was electric. Her heart pounded in her ears. How had she turned a simple diner into a forum for change? Yet as she waited, the reality of her vulnerability settled in. Could she reach him? Would Thomas allow himself to see past riches and power, to grasp the struggles of families like hers and Malik's? But then, the moment broke. He shifted in his seat, and she could see defenses climbing like a fortress around him. "I understand the importance, Sarah, but foundations have limitations. We can't save everyone," he said, his voice steady but with a tinge of apprehension. The sharp contrast of his words punctured her resolve, igniting something fierce within her. "Maybe we're not here to save everyone," she challenged, meeting his gaze head-on. "But we can start by saving one kid, one dream at a time." As each word reverberated in the small diner, she realized she was not just advocating for Malik. No, she was advocating for every child whispered into silence by a world that deemed their dreams insignificant. A sudden surge of clarity washed over her. This was her moment of truth. But just as she felt the connection building, a text message pinged on her phone, a notification that pulled her back to grim reality. It wasn't from some heroic figure. No, it was news of more cuts to the education program they had been rallying. The message derailed her thoughts, and the urgency came crashing back. Thomas's brow knit together in concern, and for the first time, she believed he might see it. The stakes were higher than she'd even anticipated. The question now was whether she could wield her truth to call him into action before it was too late. "Thomas," she implored, thinking of Malik, "what will you do next?" The silence in the diner thickened as Sarah held her breath, the weight of her question pressing against the air like a storm cloud. She scanned Thomas's face, desperately searching for any hint of understanding, any sign that he was re-evaluating the layers of his privilege. She felt an undercurrent of hope, but also an icy tremor of doubt. "What will I do next?" he echoed, his voice laced with uncertainty. The facade of the confident businessman he often donned was beginning to crack, revealing an unsteady foundation beneath. "I have obligations, Sarah. You know that," he replied, his tone defensive. The flicker of vulnerability she'd sensed was quickly replaced by a veneer of caution. "But your obligations can change lives, Thomas," she pressed, her heart racing. Each syllable that left her lips seemed to dance dangerously close to the edge of desperation. "You have the power to make a difference far beyond what you seem to believe possible. I need you to see it." She wished she could grasp the words that would resonate with him, words that could pull him wholly into her world. Instead, she felt every share of her childhood hope slipping through her fingers. The memories swirled, times when she, too, had questioned her worth and her place. But those memories now fueled her conviction. It was about more than Malik. It was about every overlooked child who dared to dream. Thomas leaned back, his expression indecipherable. Sarah quickly dove back into the topic, trying to regain control. "What if instead of seeing limitations, you could see potential? Let's rethink how we define success." Her thoughts raced forward. You leverage resources for visibility. How about leveraging visibility for impact? You might see that students like Malik don't just need attention, they need action. He rubbed a hand over his face, a gesture that revealed both frustration and contemplation. The contrast of their worlds spurred her forward, igniting a passionate resolve. Would you like to hear Malik's story? She asked, pushing past her own fears. If you see him, maybe you'll realize it's not just one struggle. It's a whole community waiting for champions. Thomas hesitated, the nerves around his mouth tightening. You're asking me to dive into something I can't promise I understand completely. It's not so simple. But as Sarah spoke about Malik's dreams and the excitement that filled his eyes with each experiment, she noticed a small shift in his stance. He sat a bit straighter, a sign that perhaps he was beginning to lean in, emotionally and intellectually. And what about you? She suddenly threw out, taking him off guard. What drives you? Is it truly just about profits, or is there something deeper? The directness of her words unnerved her, but it was a risk she felt compelled to take. Caught off guard, Thomas opened his mouth, closed it, and then looked beyond her gaze, as though searching for answers amongst the busy diner patrons. I'm not sure I remember, he admitted quietly, a flicker of vulnerability peeking through. And in that silence, she recognized a personal conflict brewing within him, a clash between ambition and moral obligation. What was it to embody the very thing he criticized? She could practically see the battle unfolding in his mind, the struggle between the high-rise corporate world and the palpable fierceness of real lives teetering at the edges of hope. Just as Sarah prepared to reinforce her challenge, time froze around them, an unwelcome distraction. The clattering of plates and voices flooded back, but this time it felt almost dissonant, pulling her from their charged moment. She checked her phone again. There were messages flooding in for support, followers eager for updates. Still seeing the challenge before her, she recognized the urgency of the situation. Thomas, she pressed, locking eyes with him once more, feeling the moment shift. This is bigger than you and me. It's about change. Don't you see? What will it take for you to be on board? We can't keep ignoring these kids waiting to break free. The gauntlet lay bare between them, her intensity now mirroring the heartbeat of the diner. As their gaze locked, she sensed he teetered on the edge of a pivotal decision, and she held her breath, knowing their conversations were leading them to a critical intersection. Could he step beyond obligation and embrace the possibility of real impact? Just as she braced for his answer, a distant siren blared outside, cutting through their dialogue like a knife, stealing away what could have been a moment of clarity. Determined, Sarah insisted. We have to discuss this now, before they silence us again. She saw the storm in the distance on his features, but she knew, somehow she would navigate through it. The moment of truth was at hand. Would Thomas champion Malik's dreams? Would he choose to be the catalyst for change, or stand idly by as another chance slipped through their fingers? As Sarah maintained her unwavering gaze on Thomas, anticipation thrummed through her veins. She could sense an underlying tension, both personal and profound, nestled within him. It was as if a dam had begun to crack, and within that crack lay not just opportunity for change, but the chance for a different path. Not just for Malik, but for Thomas too. Are you really willing to throw away the chance to do something meaningful? She pressed, her voice barely above a whisper, charged with an electric urgency. In that moment, all of her hopes and fears coalesced, and she understood fully that this conversation could very well define not only Malik's future, but also the course of Thomas's own soul-searching journey. Thomas's brow furrowed as he wrestled internally with her words. What if I failed? His voice, thick with an unexpected vulnerability, betrayed the turmoil he appeared to be encased in. What if I don't have what it takes to navigate this? His defense was familiar. Sarah had faced it countless times before with others who cloaked their fears with practicality. But what if you do? What if this is the wake-up call you've needed? Her determination surged, and she decided in that instant to turn the conversation toward his own ambitions. Success isn't just measured in quarterly profits, Thomas. It's also in the impact you leave behind. Are you prepared to risk everything to find out where you stand amid moral dilemmas? His jaw clenched, a sign he was grappling with forces beyond mere business ethics. Sarah could see the abstract walls around his ambitions beginning to falter. Every leader has moments where they must confront the uncomfortable truths of their choices, she continued. You might realize that it's possible to redefine your identity, not just as a businessman but as a human being. Wouldn't that be worth it? To enter a space of discovery? Thomas exhaled sharply, a shuddering breath that shook at the very core of his conditioned self-assurance. Sarah watched as clarity illuminated his expression, and for a fleeting moment, she dared to hope he might find the courage buried inside. But then, doubt veiled his eyes again, clouding the possibility she had glimpsed. The things I deal with every day, they're relentless. It's a game I didn't choose. The resignation in his voice rendered her heart heavy, but she refused to relent. This was her moment to push beyond boundaries. That game, Thomas, it's one you can change. You have the capacity to shift perceptions. That's one of your greatest strengths. Turning the tide isn't merely about resources, it's about ethos. You don't have to live by the rules that bind you. You can pave a new way, she urged, leaning forward, willing every ounce of her conviction to penetrate the layers he had built around himself. He absorbed her words, his inner conflict visibly deepening. Was it fear or fatigue that had anchored him to his current direction? As he scrutinized the table, she wondered if he could visualize not just Malik's face, but the faces of countless others who had long been overlooked, hidden in the shadows of ambition that overshadowed their potential. With a sudden urgency, she contemplated how she could push the narrative forward. What if you agreed to meet Malik? What if you made a promise to yourself to witness his journey, to see his fire up close? Because right now, you're holding an opportunity for both of you. Just then, the diner door swung open with a sudden gust that seemed to echo the charge in the air. A group of loud, animated teenagers stumbled in, their vitality a stark contrast to the intensity at the booth. Their laughter rang like a fresh bell, cutting through the heaviness that had settled between them. Amid the chatter, she saw the concern flit across Thomas's face. Was it about being seen negotiating his decisions in this moment? Or was it the reminder of the ordinary life he had distanced himself from? She couldn't tell, but the interruption felt stark, a reality check against her dream. Don't lose sight of this, Thomas, she breathed out, her heart pounding. You have a choice to make, one that could bind or liberate your future. With disbelief clouding his features, he remained silent, his fingers tapping restlessly on the table. Yet somewhere beneath that uncertainty roared a storm of change begging for release. As the din of their surroundings swelled, Sarah realized that despite the noise, they were at a critical crossroad. She had pushed the conversation to its limits, but she sensed that the end had not yet arrived. Let's step outside, she suggested, sensing the urgency of their circumstance intensifying. It's time for you to decide who you truly want to be. Their eyes locked once more, and for a brief moment, as he wrestled with his conflict, she could see the tremors of awakening within him. But they were standing on the precipice of decision, and she knew that whatever came next could either change everything or dissolve in uncertainty. The next moment would be decisive. Would Thomas step into the storm of realization, or would he retreat into complacency? She took a breath, preparing to navigate the unknown, knowing that transcendence often required a leap, however frightening. As they stepped outside, the crisp air washed over them like a renewed promise. The sun cast a warm glow, illuminating the uncertainty etched on Thomas's face. Here, in this open space, the stakes felt palpable, flipping the emotional switch from safety to upheaval. Look, Sarah began, her voice piercing through the ambient noise of the street. You've dedicated your life to a world that thrives on competition. But what if the real competition lies within you, within your own fears and expectations? Thomas shook his head, exhaling a breath heavy with doubt. I've spent years building this company. Walking away from that would be a monumental risk. I'm not sure if I'm ready to dismantle it all. But what if dismantling that facade is what will free you? Sarah pressed, her heart drumming in rhythm with his internal struggle. You're not just a CEO, you're a person capable of dreaming, of evolving. She watched as he wrestled with her words. This moment demanded transformation, yet the weight of his identity threatened to pull him back. You've been conditioned to believe that your value is tied to your success, she continued. But what if your real measure is the courage to embrace vulnerability, to connect with those you've overlooked? In the shifting landscape of his face, she caught glimpses of a man teetering on the edge of a breakthrough. His lips quirked into a faint smile, a mere flicker born of a thought he hadn't explored until now. You really think it's possible to change that perception? Absolutely, she asserted. You've already taken the first step just by questioning it. That doubt is a signpost, alerting you that there's more at stake than mere profits. Imagine if you redirected that ambition towards something that fuels both your heart and your mind. His fingers brushed against his temples, a manifestation of the mental gymnastics unfolding within. There was a growing realization that this crossroads echoed more than finance or status. It beckoned to a deeper essence of purpose. What do I even stand to gain from stepping away from what I've built? She seized that moment, keen to amplify his burgeoning curiosity. You could gain authenticity. You could connect with people like Malik on a level that transcends mere transaction. You'd discover a world where your influence is measured not in dollars, but in the lives you inspire. This could be the rebirth of your career, a new identity built on integrity. For the first time since they had begun this dialogue, something flickered behind his eyes, a glimmer of possibility surfacing through the murky pool of self-doubt. You know, I've always been told that success is a solitary journey. What if I've been wrong all along? Every successful person I know has left a legacy by sharing their journey, not by traveling solo. You don't have to go through this alone, she encouraged, her tone a mix of reassurance and conviction. A defining moment awaits you, Thomas, she added, crossing her arms as if to hold his gaze steady amidst the chaos of uncertainty swarming around them. The fear of failure is natural, but it's also a part of growth. The challenge is to embrace it. So what's it going to be? He hesitated, a flash of something indecipherable flickering through his expression. Then, with a sudden resolve, he straightened his back and took a deep breath. I want to meet Malik. I need to... His voice softened as if the admission carried a weight beyond mere words. I need to confront my own barriers. As those words slipped from his lips like a confession, the environment shifted. The noise of the diner faded, replaced by a newfound silence that enveloped them, a desolate canvas for his transformation. Then let's make that happen, Sarah said, her heart racing now with the rhythm of possibility. But before they had the chance to exchange further plans, a park ranger's urgent shout cut through their conversation. Hey, I need your help! Thomas turned abruptly, caught off guard by the interruption. His moment of clarity slipped chaotically as newfound commitment tumbled into the unknown. Sarah's heart raced. What urgency awaited them now? Would this new call demand action, or redirect them entirely from their fragile breakthrough? The path ahead promised uncertainty, but for the first time, it felt charged with potential. Thomas instinctively stepped toward the sound, instincts honed from years in a demanding career prompting him to act. Sarah followed, her curiosity piqued, but she also felt a fear that this was merely an obstruction in the burgeoning path of transformation they had begun to forge. The ranger was waving frantically, signaling them to approach the edge of the nearby park. Confusion clouded Thomas's mind as he moved, the urgency of this moment swirling in contrast to the introspection that had just begun. As they arrived, the ranger gestured toward an aging oak tree where a group of gathered onlookers had formed. There's a child stuck up there, the ranger said, voice strained with worry. We need someone to help get her down. It's not safe. With those words, the weight of the world descended upon Thomas. The thought of heights made him nervous, but the image of fear etched on the little girl's face pulled at him. In that instant, he felt the fear that had been paralyzing him in his own life, terrifying yet strangely familiar. Gazing up at the tree's sprawling branches, he felt a profound irony. Here lay an opportunity, a chance to address not only the child's physical predicament, but also his figurative one. For years he had shied away from discomfort. Now, what if he leaned into it instead? His heart thudded in his chest as doubt crept in. Could he face this fear and, by extension, confront the barriers he placed in his own life? The spontaneous decision surged, struggling against the trepidation. Let me, he finally declared, surprising himself at the steadiness of his voice. As he moved closer to the tree, he could feel a mental shift occurring. This was not just about helping a child. It was the embodiment of the very lesson Sarah had imparted about courage and vulnerability. Scaling the tree with surprising agility, Thomas felt a rush of adrenaline. Each step onto a branch felt like a symbolic triumph over his insecurities. Eyes wide with fear, the little girl shrank back, uncertain as to whether to trust him. Hey there, he called softly, trying to bridge the chasm of fear that stood between them. I'm here to help you. You can come down with me. His internal dialogue shifted. It was no longer just about deflecting danger. This was about connection. The little girl hesitated, and Thomas felt the moment stretch as she examined his face for the truth of his offer. Really? She asked, her voice trembling but tinged with a glimmer of hope. Absolutely. Just hold my hand, he replied, humility woven into his tone. As she reached out hesitantly, he could feel a shared moment of vulnerability, a sacred human connection materializing amidst chaos. He carefully descended, instinctively guiding her down the branches while anchoring his own footing against the trembling bark. Each step was deliberate, each movement revealing a new layer of his emerging self, one that prioritized safety and connection over solitary ambition. Once they were safely on solid ground, audible relief washed over the crowd. The little girl beamed, the light of her joy replacing the fear that had shadowed them both. "See? That wasn't so bad," Thomas said, a smile breaking through his serious demeanor. For a fleeting moment, he felt invincible, even as the reality of his decision loomed large again. As the crowd erupted into applause, Thomas discovered an unfamiliar emotional weight, the kind not tied to dollar signs but to human lives. Sarah approached, eyes glistening with pride and understanding. "You faced not only a child's fear, but your own. Did you feel that?" He nodded, reflection flooding back in. "I can't go back to the way things were before. I need to carry this feeling forward." The realization sunk deeper. It was not about dismantling what he had built, but reconstructing his approach to leadership and fulfillment. In that moment of their shared smile, a new tension sprouted within him. What would it mean to continue working on these connections rather than just profit? What path lay ahead? "Are you ready to meet Malik?" Sarah asked, her voice low enough for only him to hear. His heart raced anew, not just from the fear he had overcome, but from the prospect of confronting the true barriers that stood in his way. Doubt mingled with anticipation, creating a space for a new chapter of his life to unfold, even if he didn't yet fully understand the journey that awaited him. With new resolve, he took a step, feeling the curious weight of potential weighing on his shoulders. As they walked away from the park, shadows of uncertainty danced just out of reach. But the allure of discovery lingered in the air. What relationships could he foster? What adventures awaited him next? The world felt ripe for exploration, but first he had to embrace the uncertainties head-on. What if the next confrontation was the most revealing of all? The walk away from the park was oddly euphoric, yet suffused with an unfamiliar anxiety. Every step drew Thomas back into the realities of his structured life, yet he found himself longing for the lessons embedded in that adrenaline-fueled moment. He replayed the scene in his mind. The little girl's grip on his hand, the way her fear had lessened when she saw his determination. Something profoundly human had unfolded in that tree, and it resonated deeply within him. "Malik is one of my oldest mentors," Sarah explained as they strolled. "He's been waiting for someone like you to emerge from the corporate shadows. He's seen the cost of ambition without connection." Her words rattled around in his mind, igniting a desire to be that person she believed he could become. As they approached Malik's quaint office, a spacious room lined with books and artifacts from around the world, a wave of uncertainty washed over Thomas. Would this man see through the polished veneer of a successful career to the confusion and doubt simmering underneath? He squared his shoulders. It was now or never, a confrontation with his professional self. Malik stood up, exuding a warm charisma that instantly put Thomas at ease. "I've heard about your little adventure today," he said with a knowing smile. "You climbed a tree and saved a child. But more importantly, it seems your heart was opened as well." It felt like Malik pierced straight through him, digging into layers of vulnerability Thomas had just begun to uncover. "Most people won't recognize that," Thomas replied, forcing a laugh to mask the unease churning within him. "They just see my success on paper." "That's the root of the problem," Malik said, leaning forward, his gaze unyielding. "You've built yourself a fortress of success, but it seems it's come at the cost of connection. True leadership lies in our ability to connect, to be authentic and vulnerable with those we lead." This struck a chord deep within Thomas. He had honed his life around processes and results, infusing every interaction with calculated niceties. He hadn't realized how insulated his success had made him until now. "And what does that mean for someone like me?" he asked, seeking clarity in this unfamiliar territory. Malik paused, considering him intently. "It means looking beyond metrics and acknowledging emotions, both your own and those of others. A true leader inspires loyalty and drives passion. Your experience with that child? It's a start. But the climb isn't limited to trees, Thomas. It's about stepping toward emotional highs and sometimes lows." As Malik unraveled concepts of empathetic leadership layered with anecdotes from his own journey, Thomas's mind raced. Could he really transform? What would it look like to foster genuine connections rather than superficial alliances? The prospect terrified him, yet beckoned like a siren's call. Could empathy translate to his boardroom walls, which had been erected on steel and strategy? The conversation shifted to tangible steps, learning to listen, engaging employees not just as assets but as human beings with their own dreams and struggles. Malik's guidance resonated within, stirring the murky depths of his ambition. "I need you to keep developing this. Make it a part of your professional mission," he insisted. As they wrapped up their meeting, Thomas's pulse quickened anew. The change would demand more than just intentions. It called for action, action underpinned with genuine effort. Would he find ways to integrate these lessons into his current role, or dare he envision stepping away to build something anew, where authenticity led the charge? Saying goodbye to Malik felt significant, charged with possibilities. As he left, a lesson clamored for clarity. What new path lay before him if he truly embraced connection over mere conquest? But as he turned the corner, his phone buzzed, jarring him from his thoughts. An urgent message flickered on the screen. "We need to talk. There's a crisis with a major client." Just as quickly, the delicate threads of personal growth seemed to tangle with the unforgiving demands of his corporate life again. A voice within him wrestled for dominance. Would he succumb once more to the pressures of the past? Or was the other path, the one less traveled, now within reach? As he stepped into the bustling atmosphere of his firm, the tremor of anxiety coursed through Thomas. The stark contrast between the revelation he had encountered with Malik and the cold demands of corporate life felt jarring. The open office space, bright and sterile, buzzed with the low hum of phones ringing and keyboards clattering, a setting that should have felt familiar, yet now seemed oppressive. Gathering himself, he glanced at his watch and made a beeline for his office. Instinctively, he reached for the fallout message, "Crisis with a major client." The words dripped with urgency and bitterness, the very essence of a world that thrived on pressure. But today, he wasn't just the designated fixer of crises. He was determined to respond differently. He resolved, albeit uneasily, that this time would be an opportunity to connect rather than simply execute. Peering through the glass walls of his office, he noticed a group of his team huddled together. Their faces reflected the same worry that clenched at his gut. With a resolve that trembled at the edges, he pushed the door open. "What's the situation?" The questions came flooding in like a dam bursting. Could they keep the client? Would the recent product delay cost them? As each concern unfolded, Thomas felt the weight of his transformation pressing down on him. He had been the expert in data analyses and strategy projections, but now he needed to tap into something deeper, trust and collaboration. Instead of dictating solutions, he focused on listening. "We have to approach this as a team," he said, choosing his words carefully. "What ideas do you have? How can we turn this around together?" The room fell silent for a moment, surprised by his shift. But then they responded enthusiastically, bouncing thoughts off one another bravely. In those moments he saw small shifts in his team's demeanor, eyes lighting up, hands raised with suggestions. They weren't just assets, they were individuals shaped by their aspirations and fears. Gradually, with every idea built upon and every shared frustration acknowledged, Thomas felt the barriers of hierarchy dissolve, exposing the raw potential that had always lingered beneath. As their brainstorming morphed into a plan, he felt an unfamiliar surge of confidence. Rather than chart out another sterile presentation, he encouraged creativity, a video proposal, personal stories tied to the brand, a heartfelt outreach to the client highlighting their shared journey. It felt audacious, yet authentic, a stark departure from cold statistics. Midway through the discussion, one of the younger analysts, nerves visible in her voice, proposed highlighting the delay as an opportunity for greater innovation. The moment struck Thomas. This wasn't just a business tactic. It demonstrated vulnerability, a willingness to admit shortcomings while promising a brighter future. "Exactly. We embrace our flaws and present a narrative that resonates with human experience," he replied, energized by the shift in tone. As they crafted their message, Thomas felt a blend of fear and exhilaration blooming within him, a feeling reminiscent of that exhilarating moment in the park. There was a beautiful symmetry evolving, a blend of emotion with strategy. He was no longer the isolated decision-maker, but a compass guiding his team through stormy seas, navigating together in shared determination. They spent hours refining their approach until the surreal realization dawned on him. This wasn't merely about saving a client. It was about fostering a culture of empathy and engagement within his company, a mission Malik had awakened in him that day. As the meeting wrapped, exhilaration coursed through the team. They felt invigorated, almost electrified by the collaborative spirit that radiated from the room. The weight of Thomas's corporate identity began to shift as he stepped closer to the man he wanted to be, one who led not by authority, but by connection. But as they prepared to present their proposal that afternoon, an unexpected visitor strode into the office, a former colleague and current rival, a man known for exploiting vulnerabilities. Hoping for a miracle? He sneered, instantly dialing the tension back up. You think they'll fall for an emotional pitch over a solid product delivery? As Thomas locked eyes with him, uncertainty collided with an unexpected fire rising in his chest. How would he respond? Would he defend his newfound principles, or slip back into the defensive posture that had served him so well? The seeds of self-doubt quaked in him, urging a conflict he was now forced to confront head-on. The moment of truth was upon him. Would authenticity withstand this confrontation, or would he retreat into familiar patterns, risking everything he had just begun to learn? With the rival's sneer hanging in the air like a dark cloud, Thomas felt his heart rate escalate. The office buzz, which had once felt invigorating, morphed into an oppressive backdrop to a moment that teetered on a precarious edge. Jude was everything Thomas had worked against, ruthless, shrewd, and maddeningly effective at playing the corporate game by strict rules that Thomas had been acclimating to defy. Jude, Thomas replied, his voice steadier than he felt. We're presenting something different today, something that connects, not just sells. The words tumbled from his mouth, defiance cloaked in newfound resolve. Yet, even as he spoke, doubt slithered through him, whispering that perhaps Jude was right. Emotions are for people who can't deliver results, Jude shot back, his icy demeanor unyielding. The office, once a collective space of budding ideas, felt alien and stifled under the weight of his contempt. Watch as they prioritize the return on investment over your fairy tale narrative, Thomas. I'm here to remind you of the bottom line. The air thickened with tension as whispers crackled around the room, teammates casting wary looks between the two men. Thomas understood that their eyes were on him, not just for leadership, but for validation of his newly embraced values against the cold reasoning Jude represented. In that moment of turmoil, he questioned the very foundation of his resolve. Could vulnerability truly lead to success? Or was he simply setting himself up for failure with idealistic notions? Each heartbeat asked him, why risk everything for authenticity in a world that revered hard numbers? Numbers matter, Jude, Thomas acknowledged, but human connection drives longevity. A barrage of ideas rushed through his mind, buoyed by the collaborative spirit forged in the previous hours with his team. I believe we can align the numbers with a narrative that resonates with our clients. Jude's smirk deepened. You'll learn the hard way that empathy doesn't pay the bills, he retorted, a mixture of arrogance and concern surfacing in his eyes. Perhaps, Thomas continued, his pulse steadying. But what I am aiming to build here is more than just profit margins. It's about trust, integrity, and a connection that fosters loyalty. His gaze did not waver from Jude's. It was more than a statement. It was a rallying cry to himself, a toxic interaction that would not define him anymore. From outside the heated exchange, he sensed a shared silence in his team, an unspoken agreement forming around him, eager for leadership that invigorated rather than intimidated. With a deep breath, he turned to them, a soft smile breaking across his face. Let us focus on what matters most, our proposal to the client. It's time to show them who we truly are. The renewed energy in the room, pulsating and warm, surged as they rallied around him, whispering plans and laughing with a hopeful eagerness. The air became deeply charged with ambition, leaving Thomas with an urgent realization. The true power of leadership lay not just within strategy or hard numbers, but in enabling others to rise up with courage by his side. In the moments preceding their pivotal presentation, Thomas wrestled with Jude's lingering sneer, the voice of doubt that would follow him as he stepped further into his own evolution. Would he be able to maintain this facade, to uphold the values he had begun to cherish against the tide of corporate skepticism? He recognized he would constantly confront the friction between aspiration and reality. As they finalized their pitch, a commotion broke out near the entrance to their conference room. A familiar figure strode in, unexpectedly, Malik, the mentor whose teachings had ignited so many changes within Thomas. The surprise shot through him, electrifying his nerves as Malik turned to Thomas, eyes glinting with the knowing gaze of someone who understood the winds of transformation. What will you choose, Thomas? Malik's voice cut through the cacophony, an anchor amidst the turbulence. Who will you decide to be today? With the stakes at an all-time high, the path ahead became less about competing with a rival and more about embracing the man he had the potential to become. It was time to rediscover his own purpose, not just for the company, but for himself. But Thomas's resolve was about to be tested once again. Would Malik's presence serve as inspiration or a reminder of how much he still needed to grow? The next moment promised to define the essence of the leader he aspired to be. As the meeting commenced, the air crackled with anticipation. Thomas's team glanced from him to Malik, the energy palpable as they prepared to present their unified vision to the client. Every face was a mixture of nerves and determination. Would this moment be the culmination of transformation? Would they prove that connection and authenticity could pave the way to success? Today we are not just showing you numbers or statistics. We are showing you our story, Thomas began, his voice steady as he faced the assembled client group. Gone were the days of hiding behind polished terms and dry metrics. This was about real people, real dreams and shared aspirations. He glanced at Malik, who stood silently behind him, embodying the mentorship that had catalyzed this shift. Thomas felt a surge of gratitude. He was ready to let this newfound authenticity shine, not just for himself, but for everyone he represented. As his team presented their proposals, immersive storytelling centered around their product and genuine engagement with the client, Thomas could see the shift in the room. Eyes softened, attention sharpened. The battle-tested narratives laden in hopeful intentions resonated far deeper than numbers alone ever could. Watching the client's expressions evolve as teammates elaborated on Malik's vision, he felt a powerful validation. When a member of the client's team spoke up, "This hits home. You're showing us the real impact with your product, not just promising profits." Thomas knew they had transcended the transactional. Each question that followed was rooted in engagement, digging deeper into personal motivations. How does this connect? Why does this matter? For the first time in his career, Thomas felt the barriers between him and the client dissolve. They were no longer strangers negotiating a deal, but partners seeking a shared future. As the presentation concluded, Malik stepped forward. What Thomas and his team have put forth here isn't just a proposal, it's a commitment, one anchored in genuine leadership that values people over profits. His voice was calm yet resolute, ringing with the gravitas of someone who had traversed the complexities of business and personal ambition. Change is uncomfortable, but it's also the bridge to a legacy defined by integrity and empathy. When the applause erupted, Thomas stood stunned, a cacophony of pride and relief washing over him. This was not just a win for their company. It was a monumental victory for every child dreaming of a brighter future, every discouraged employee, and for himself. He had confronted the pool of old habits and emerged victorious in a battleground where vulnerability and strength entwined. Days turned into weeks, and the client's excitement transformed into partnership discussions. Together they crafted initiatives targeting community outreach, seeking ways to empower marginalized youth through practical programs. With each meeting, Thomas championed collaboration over competition. He encouraged his team to share their narratives. They were no longer just employees, they were leaders in change. With Malik often at his side, Thomas became a well-known face in community forums, valuing connection and service above profit margins. Schools invited him to speak, and he shared his transformation, from a man ensnared in the corporate cycle to one rooted in purpose and empathy. The momentum built around him, structured not by rigid hierarchies, but encouraged by open dialogues. Thomas experienced profound personal growth. No longer did he cower before the thoughts of doubt. He had transformed apprehension into confidence. He navigated his new reality with authenticity, aligning business goals with meaningful outreach efforts. This metamorphosis became the cornerstone of his identity, one firmly planted in the belief that true success transcends the confines of balance sheets. Yet, the truest measure of his evolution occurred during a later visit to the after-school program where he first met Malik. The laughter of children filled the air as they engaged in vibrant science experiments. Sparks of curiosity illuminated in their eyes. Thomas paused, overwhelmed by the sense of fulfillment that washed over him. Standing amidst the joyful chaos, he realized his journey had come full circle. This wasn't a fleeting moment or a resume notch. It was a genuine reconnection to his own childhood dreams, a rekindled sense of purpose flowing through him and igniting those around him. He knelt down to Malik, who seemed deep in conversation with a group of kids. This is what it's about, isn't it?" he murmured, gesturing towards the vibrancy surrounding them. Malik smiled knowingly. "Yes, Thomas. Remember, the impact you create here reverberates far beyond this moment. This is your legacy. As Thomas looked at the curious faces of children eager to learn, those who once felt unseen, he felt an invigorating sense of purpose blossom within him. This was a profound achievement. He had learned that through authentic connection, he could empower and uplift those striving for a better future, just as he had once strived. With his heart full of promise and ambition, he stood tall, resolute and transformed, ready to embrace whatever came next with unyielding strength. Now, as you contemplate the journey of transformation Thomas underwent, you are invited to consider your own path. Real change starts with each person, just as it started with him. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.